By definition, a prophet can be annoying. Pope Francis has something to say about Christmas this year, and it's actually pretty much the exact opposite of what any holiday-loving Christian wants to hear. On Thursday, the Pope remarked that due to recent events, it is clear that the world has chosen war and hate over peace, rendering the meaning of Christmas festivities absolutely meaningless. Even as this 80-foot-long Christmas tree was being wheeled into the Vatican just outside the casa where he lives, the Pope spoke. Christmas is approaching. There will be lights, parties, Christmas trees, nativity scenes. It's all a charade. It's all a charade. The world continues to go to war. The world has not chosen a path of peace. Referring to the recent terror attacks in France that left 130 dead, the worst acts of terror in the history of that nation. And referring to all the other global attacks, including the bombing of a Russian airliner and the double suicide bombings in Lebanon, prompting nations to step up bombardment of Syria, where the United States has launched 6,300 airstrikes in the last 15 months, destroying 4,500 buildings. Other nations, including Russia, France, Saudi Arabia, have also collectively dropped more than 1,000 bombs on Syria. President Obama recently announced the indefinite prolongation of the 14-year war in Afghanistan. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and Pakistan have killed nearly 1 million, we think, civilians. 1 million. And on top of all that, just last month, the United States finalized a sale of warships to Saudi Arabia that is the largest arms deal in history. These are the words of our Holy Father. There are wars today everywhere and hate. We should ask for the grace to weep for this world which does not recognize still the path of peace, to weep for those whose lives in war have been destroyed, and then even have the cynicism to deny it. God weeps. Jesus weeps. The head of the largest church in all of Christendom, our Catholic Church, that Pope continues. What shall remain? What shall remain? Ruins? Thousands of children without education? So many innocent victims? And lots of money in the pockets of arm dealers? Yes, the Pope concluded, God is weeping because we have chosen the way of war, the way of hatred, the way of enmities. We should ask, he concluded, we should ask for the grace to weep for this world which still does not recognize the path to peace, to weep for those whose lives for war, who live for war rather, and have the cynicism to deny that. He's right. He's so right. There's not much peace on earth this Christmas, and very little goodwill to our fellow human beings. It's no wonder wherever I go, especially amongst this generation that we serve, so many tell me they do not watch or read or listen to the news anymore. It's just too depressing, they say. It's also negative. And when I asked them what many of them thought about that bombing of that airliner, So many of them talked about that incident that was in the news for 4 and 5 days constantly. So many referred to it as something they had heard nothing about. Let me tell you, the ones waiting at the airport for their loved ones that day didn't want to hear about it either. But they had no choice. Can somebody explain to me how a 20-year-old can live in this world and not hear anything about something that has drawn worldwide attention and has just been so awful to human beings somewhere in this world? I don't get it. I'm not sure God gets it. Christmas? It's not honest. It's lying. Unless it addresses the atrocities of this world. We cannot gloss over the atrocities of this world. Otherwise, all the tinsel and all the ornaments and all the colored lights only serve to distract us, to entertain us away from the whole reason we celebrate Christmas. The whole reason Christmas even happened in the first place. You see, we may think that we are far from the world of Jesus and the evil he faced in his day, but the crippled world he was born into can happen anywhere and at any time, and it's happening. Things have gone terribly wrong in that world to which he was born, and it has in ours. His world, like ours, needed a wake-up call, needed something like the coming of God. And it's not just a world that needs a wake-up call sometimes, because the world is only as good as the individuals within it. And so it is individual me who needs a wake-up call as well. If we are not people who are constantly being converted to the newness of God, then how can we expect the world to be more than its status quo? It was the Lord who promised us in the prophet Isaiah that God would raise up a just shoot who will do what is right and good. The image here is of a tree that is devastated, and all that remains is a stump. The prophet saw that things were going to get very bad for the people of God. They will get worse before they get better. Nevertheless, the prophet saw that while the people of Israel would seem to be dead, life would remain within that stump, a shoot of life barely detectable at first will begin to emerge from that stump. But once that little tiny shoot goes forth, it can become a mighty tree. I'm reminded of Picasso's famous work of art called Guernica. After many of us 2 summers ago walked the Camino, we went to a museum in Spain, and I found myself mesmerized by this work of art. It's huge. It's huge. And on its canvas was mayhem, dismembered bodies, bloodbath, all in black and white, contorted figures. And then this little thing, right there near the bottom, coming out of a broken sword, there was just this little tiny flower. This little tiny flower was growing in the midst of the mayhem. This fragile, painful hope that refused to die. It seems I stood there for hours. This tiny, fragile, real little flower remains a testimony for me to God breaking into our narcissistic, violent world, which is to say, the unleashing of God in the flesh, the unleashing of incarnation is still possible. No matter what the tragedies of our family, of our lives, no matter the sun and the moon falling from the sky, as Jesus proclaimed in the gospel, no matter, there is still the possibility of the unleashing of God in the flesh, in the incarnation, in this world. And if we don't stay vigilant, you and I, that's what Jesus commanded in that gospel. If we're not paying attention, vigilant in our expectation that this is possible, then we will not make it through the tribulations that are to come. If we don't look now for that little shoot coming out of a stump of what has been devastated in this world, then we will not make it through the tribulations. Those days when the sun and the moon and the stars do fall, days not unlike these. My friends, make no mistake about it. Christ will come. And that's the proclamation Advent shoves in our face these 4 weeks. Christ will come. Love is coming. And love is coming now. But if we're not vigilant, we're going to miss it. In this kind of a world, we may ask ourselves, I guess, is it possible God forgot to come? That's an honest question. We can also ask, can God rescue us from this? And the answer in the prophets is yes, God can. Because the truly human one and the truly human ones will be those who try their best to know what is going on in the world and how it's affecting human beings on this planet, and who care enough to weep still for what is not true and still possible, and who will choose, like that tiny little shoot, to live with justice and to be in right relationship. And in this kind of a world, that kind of goodness in the midst of those atrocities will be nothing less than divine and shocking. Love is breaking through. God keeps God's promise. Love is breaking through, but we are missing it. Love is breaking into a loveless world. How's that for a surprise? But it's happening right here this morning. In you who gather against the night, who gather as the world gets darker and colder, who dare to come out of the cells of your individual and comfortable lives to gather with even strangers, who still find reason to say thank you, who still say what the last 3 words of the Bible say, come, Lord Jesus, come. We have had glimpses, you and I, of this just shoot. Fragments of the incarnation are spilling into our day if we're vigilant. This is the love for which we wait. And this is the love we will run to if we see it. Isn't love worth waiting for? Isn't love worth raising our heads out of the sand of Candy Crush and busyness and even sports? Isn't love worth our vigilance? And if it's not, then as that annoying prophet said last Thursday, if it's not, then isn't Christmas just some sort of charade?